Last week, we took a stroll down memory lane as we reached our 200th episode, celebrating 6 years of work that has transformed an intangible dream into the object known as Arabella. About 150 people came through for the open house to come lay hands on the boat and to walk around on deck. Folks came from as far as Salt Lake City, Kansas, and Maryland to see it in person, and we had a really great time talking with everyone that came by. As the sun went down, we fired up the live stream and had our first chance to introduce KP, an experienced captain and shipwright that has been hired to help shepherd Arabella into the water. The goal for Splash Day is sometime in the spring of 2023. In order to pay KP some amount of what they're worth, we've started a bonfire campaign with an all-new shirt design. It's available as a t-shirt, long and short-sleeved, and also as a sweatshirt too. There's a limited amount of time to get one of these, so check out the link in the description and pick up some swag for yourself, and let's get KP on board to make this the most productive year yet in the boathouse. On this week's episode, we'll go through a couple of projects that got done just before the open house. First, Anne finishes off the settee locker frame with some 100-year-old bungs. Then Steve visits an 8th grade boat building club. And lastly, Steve puts together a tile project and mounts the diesel heater to the bulkhead.
We haven't had any particular cause to be fussy about some of the finishes that we've been doing on Victoria's pieces. Sometimes we're stripping them back entirely. Sometimes there's been an opportunity where it's slightly hidden material and that sort of thing. But in this case, for this settee locker, the one just above the settee or behind the settee, it's maybe nice to make a few bungs that look a little bit like this. I don't particularly like mixing together things to try to find exactly the right color stain to put on something. And besides, we do have this already aged, beautiful wood in piles with all kinds of different colors, grain, tightness, and all of that. And so we actually have a few pieces here that are going to make really nice shallow bungs for these pieces so that it's an uninterrupted, or at least mostly uninterrupted, color and texture. So I found a couple of pieces that seem to work really good as far as I think. We have this beautiful honey color here that you can't make any other way other than sitting up against it. For 100 years. And then here we have a bit of something that's going to work for here. Similar grain. And maybe it's a little bit off, but aren't bungs always a little bit off? Don't we like to see that it's natural material that changes from piece to piece? And we have stacks and stacks of this stuff, and it really is like a little... They may seem like tiny samples, but they end up being very useful. Let's make some 100-year-old bungs. The thing that's special about these two is I'm going to try to preserve the outside bit. I'm going to try to see if I can put these in and like leave the finish on the outside, which is tricky when you think about it. That was easy. That was my first go. It's a little proud of the surface, but I'm getting smarter slowly but surely. The places we must go to. Let's cross the muddy river and love tends to feel. Say you don't know, say you don't look. it'll disappear. Let's go. Be a little bit more. And I'll shave off just the tiniest bit more. Don't take the finish off. This is kind of meditative and nice, but it's fussy. Close, I think. Yep, I like that. That's fine. What I needed to do was put these in at the right depths so that the finish landed in the same plane as the rest of this finish, so that when I go to sand it, it looks relatively the same. Instead of setting them in and cutting them from the outside, I had to cut them from the back. To know how deep I wanted them to go, I used a regular bamboo skewer and marked it with the chisel. And then I went over here to the bench and shaved off and snuck up to the depth that I wanted. This is perhaps one of the fussiest jobs I have ever done on or in a boat, and my first run at it, to tell you the truth. All of these bungs are put in with shellac, which is a fine and proper glue to be using for them. On my boat, I've also used varnish to put in bungs. Never epoxy, please. Please, as if I could be the voice of the future owner of your boat, do not epoxy bungs in. There's no need to do that. The reason for using a nice, soft, easy to remove glue is that you want to be able to get to the fasteners later. So when you bung something on a boat, consider the fact that you're going to have to remove them. All of this is going to get sanded with 220 sandpaper, and anything that's bare will get taken down to 220 as well. 2 coats of varnish primer on anything bare, and then 2 coats over the whole thing of Gleam 2.0. That's the varnish we've been using from Total Boat. All in all, a nice little piece of furniture for inside the boat, and it's really neat to match up both finish and grain for something like this.
Down the road from Granby, Massachusetts is Granby, Connecticut. And at the middle school there, a small group of students has been meeting after classes to work on their own boat project. A while back, on the same day that several other visitors were there to help re-side the boathouse, the kids had come by to hear from Steve about the project and to see Arabella for themselves. They talked and asked questions for an hour or so, and then took a bottle of epoxy back home. Now, 13 weeks later, Steve and Ann stopped by to see the progress they've made on their stitch and glue project.
The sounds of my people.
That sounds about right. Yeah! Hello! Hey, yeah.
Steve's friend Tim has done small boat projects himself and wanted to bring the experience to his students. Going over the plans at Chesapeake Light Craft, they picked the Eastport Pram because it was something they thought they might be able to do easily in a classroom setting. Rather than get the parts pre-cut, Tim opted to have the students cut out the pieces themselves.
I had them first sort of like drafting parts of it and looking with an architectural scale, which I hit on them. And we looked through a few of the patterns in this old book. I don't know if you've seen it. But just to get the idea of what's entailed in boat building. And then these plans came with a lot of full set patterns or these half patterns. So the full set patterns, the full size patterns were pretty easy. The kids laid them out, they taped them to the plywood, and they just took like a little, 1/4-inch brad and they just banged. And then we cut a few wooden battens, and we had them mark the, when we were doing the planking. The full-size patterns are just a whole different beast to deal with because I don't know, they're just a lot to roll out on a table, roll out on a piece of plywood, and get banged out. But the kids, they handled it well, and it's for sure. You can see there's some mistakes made. When they were first learning how to use the jigsaw, like they were wandering a bit. But we had, in the beginning, a kid on like a small block plane and a kid on a little bit bigger block plane, just kind of leveling it out and sighting it. And then we were cleaning it up with like a Shinto rasp on the sides. And but it seems to be going together even better than I thought. So I would encourage anyone to try to cut the pieces out themselves. It offers like a more satisfying challenge, I think. The stitch and glue process is so simple. I feel like I've never used a pre-cut kit. I feel like with an unlimited budget, it might be a fun thing to do with kids, but really, I think they're having the most fun sort of working out the math and the three-dimensional rendering of this while they're doing the patterning. And I think missing the patterning, you would miss a big part of the building.
Yeah.
And understanding sort of how all the pieces go together. It'd be a little bit like you're not using as much of your imagination, I would think, right? It's
you learn a lot through lofting and drawing out the boat. Imagine marking and cutting out the patterns, similar,
With them, like their 8th grade math level, working with scale, and this is smaller than this, so they had to scale up. So I think the Chesapeake plans have like at least 3 different scales on them. I think that's cool, and that would all be missed if we got a kit full of parts.
Yeah. Well, if we follow Dickinson's instructions and we want to mount the diesel heater where we want to mount it in the boat, this is essentially what we end up with. So I don't have the numbers on me at the moment, but I remember that it needs to be, I think it's 18 inches from the side of anything flammable from the stove, higher than that above, and I think it was like 6 inches below. So if you were to mount this on a bulkhead with nothing around it, you could probably get away with just some sheet metal on the wall behind it. So they say that you should have this cement fiberboard, and then if you're going to use metal, an air gap, and then the sheet metal, or you can use the fiberboard, the cement board, and ceramic tile. And that is what we've elected to do. Ceramic tile is definitely a little bit heavier than the metal, so we picked the thinnest, lightest tiles that we could find. And it's not a humongous area that's getting tiled. And then the stove just mounts against it, so it'll sit up a couple inches off the bottom, and we'll bolt it through this and then bolt it through the bulkhead. So I'm at the point now where we can put in the fiberglass tape and the first round of thin set and start and put some tile on. It's been a long, long time since I've done a tile job. But I borrowed the tile saw from my mom, and we got everything we need. So let's do a relatively tricky tile job. Thankfully, it's small. The stove is supposed to have a drip tray underneath it, and that is so that if the stove drips diesel when you start it, or if it goes out and drips or something happens, you have a spot where it can catch that little bit of fuel. And also it's really close to the settee berth, so by having a base around it, it's just a little less chance of bumping into it and a little more of this space belongs to the stove.
With the tiles drying out inside, there was some time to tidy up the workshop ahead of the open house, and little Aaron was on hand to help out with that.
This is actually really good. To get this place nice and put together, it would be great for the open house, and it should be easy to keep it that way by the time KP comes.
That look.
Just knocking off sharp corners where we cut it. Fill to water line. Seems simple enough.
Like making noodle soup.
So I want to make sure this stuff is mixed really, really well. If we have any dry grout in there, it's not going to set up right. Let's start high. Horrible sound.
It's really visceral.
Really visceral sound. Yeah. It's like nails on a chalkboard. I think we can let that dry for a little bit. We'll glue on the mahogany trim pieces here. Then it'll be ready to go in the boat. So the lesson here is if you do a good job with varnishing, in 100 years, someone can do a light sand and some more varnishing. Not bad. Thread the needle here. Alrighty. All right, what's the over-under on me making it to the boathouse without falling and smashing this? Watering cup and mounting gasket keeps bit cool and holds the bit in place while drilling. And that's all they tell you. Judging by the pictures, you put the adhesive on the box, stick the box to where you want, fill the upper box with water, and it works kind of like a bushing. Alright, well, That was easy.
Oh.
It's not a terribly complicated tile job, but it is the most complicated tile job I've ever done. I haven't done much tile, and I haven't done tile in like 10 years. So considering that it's probably the most complicated job I've ever did after a very long hiatus, I'm pretty happy with how it came out. It's certainly not perfect, and if any of you are tile experts and want to leave some comments about what we can do better with the tile work in the future, we do have a little bit more coming up. We've got a stainless steel heat shield that Evan made that we're going to put up here on the deck beams. And I'm going to do some tile work eventually in the corner of the house here once the house sides are more defined and finished. And that way we can stick the stovepipe really nice and tight in the corner there and not have to worry about scorching the house sides. All in all, it wasn't a terribly difficult project. It only took a few days really, which for boat projects is pretty quick. And I'm really happy with the results. When we have some really nice cold weather, all of this tile will warm up greatly, which will be really nice. And we'll have to see how hot the heater and everything gets, but I think, yeah, so far I think I'm happy, and I really like the tile. I think it adds some color and a little more character to Arabella. Not that Arabella really needs more character. So one of my personal challenges with the interior has been I want to be able to remove the entire interior without taking out any bungs. Like literally take out the entire interior of the boat and not pop a single bung. And so far, I'm on track. So all these bungs are to fill old holes and to attach the supports on the back. But you don't actually need to take any of the bungs out. All you have to do is find the carriage bolts hidden in the back and undo the nuts and washers, take out a few screws that aren't bunged, and you should be able to remove pretty much the whole interior. Victoria's was the ceiling put in and then the beautiful interior built on it, and everything was nailed and screwed and bunged, and there was no way to take anything apart without taking out all the bungs. And then how do you get them to match? Finishes don't match when you put them back in, and you know, small problems, but problems I'm trying to avoid.